Welcome back to the channel today, part 2 of the burning of Prospero. A little more backstory and then we can get into it, but I promise we will see action in this video. So, opposing, Magnus has discovered that Horus is about to betray the Emperor. We don't need to know why, it doesn't matter. Horus is about to betray the Emperor, and Magnus knows, but he can't get a message to him in time. He doesn't know how it's going to happen or where, but he knows that Horus is about to betray the Emperor, and that he knows that Horus knows he knows, if that makes sense. So Horus knows that Magnus is trying to rat on him. Magnus thinks about sending a ship to warn the Emperor on Terra. It's not going to get there in time. He knows Horus is going to move before then. Same with an astropathic message, so the Imperium uses astropaths to send psychic messages across the galaxy, but it takes time. That's not going to get there in time either. Horus is going to act too quickly. So, Magnus has one option in his mind, which is to enact a sort of astral projection ritual to basically have his soul enter the warp, appear instantly at Terra, and speak to the Emperor, soul to person. He knows it's a breach of the edicts of Nicaea. He knows that the Legion, it's been a number of years since Nicaea, so I think this happened the next week. It's taking some time. It's months before the events of Istvan 3, so we know the clock is ticking, and that Magnus has got to, if he wants to act, he's got to act now. So he enacts a ritual that has thousands killed, thousands of thralls are killed, psychers are burned out, and Magnus projects his soul into the Imperial Palace, but he arrives in the warp just outside the Imperial Palace, next to a great barrier. There is a great barrier the Emperor has erected, and a friendly demon, friendly powerful demon, says, "I'll get rid of that for you," and essentially he and Magnus, the details aren't critical. His presence there causes that barrier to no longer be there. Details aside. That barrier gone, Magnus appears before the Emperor and then instantly realizes what's just happened. The Emperor has been tunneling into the webway as part of his secret webway project that he's told nobody about. And Magnus has just taken away the one and only barrier between the webway and the warp. And now demons are flooding into the webway, the Imperial portion of the webway, the Imperial throne room anyway. And the Emperor just sees Magnus, realizing what he's done, leaves without saying anything, and essentially appears back on Prospero completely failed. This is the origin of the phrase, Magnus did nothing wrong, that you'll see floating around sort of 30k, 40k meme places. Magnus did do something wrong. He broke the friggin' warp barrier that protected the webway from demons, who are, until this very day, flooding into the Imperial Palace, or at least they would be if that barrier wasn't there. And this forces the Emperor to take up a seat on the Golden Throne, as a fully conscious human, not as the corpse we see in 40k, although he's still technically alive. That this guy is alive, sitting on the throne for 10,000 years, because of Magnus, and Horus. But, Magnus basically takes the Emperor out of the game, forces him to be on Terra the whole time. The Custodes and Silent Sisters and all the forces of the Imperium are now having to deal with this demonic invasion of the homeworld, which if Terra goes down, you can't have inter-system travel anymore because you won't have the Astronomicon to be that beacon in the warp. Also, the home world of humanity is going to be destroyed, which will cause a massive civil war. Not that there's one coming anyway. Over who's going to be in charge of humanity, because surely the Emperor is going to either go down with it or lose his throne world. It's bad. It's really bad. Also, humanity is now permanently attached to the warp. The Webway project is a complete failure. Humanity's doomed because they're forced to rely on psychic powers. They're forced to interact with the warp, which means people are eventually going to realize there are gods in the warp, like Lorgar did. It basically damns humanity and forces the Emperor to take a back seat passively in the upcoming heresy. Magnus doing nothing would have been infinitely better option than what he did do. But he did it in good faith. He did it with the best of intentions. He did it to be loyal. Magnus is fully loyal. He has no intention of betraying the Emperor. He knew that what he did was a crime, but he did it for the sake of the Imperium, and he thought it would be okay. The Emperor is beyond pissed, as you can imagine, and he sends Leman Russ and the Space Wolves to bring Magnus back in judgment, and I will play for you the words of the decree now.
It is hereby decreed that Magnus, Primarch of the 15th Legiones Astartes, be brought forth in censure and bound by law to stand before the throne imperial of Terra, there to answer for his actions and those of his Gene's sons.
Note that it's an arrest warrant, it's not an execution order. Magnus is to be brought back to Terra to stand judgment. He's not to be killed or massacred, or his legions not to be destroyed. And so the Space Wolves marshal at a planet called Beta Garmin, which will become very famous later in the Heresy, which, if I ever continue the series, we'll talk about, where they await the rest of the Censure fleet, the Censure host, led by Constantine Valdor. So let's have a look at the Space Wolves who make up the majority of the guys who are going to be fighting at the Battle of Prospero. The 6th Legion, the Rout, the Vlaka Fenrica, the Space Wolves. Space Wolves come from a planet called Fenris, which is a permanent, basically Space Vikings is what these guys are. Space Vikings leaning heavily into wolf stuff. Fenris is an ice death world where there's crazy, ever-changing ice, then water, then ice again. So you can't have a permanent civilization except for basically the fortress monastery of the Space Wolves on a big mountain called the Fang. So it's basically migratory Viking ice tribes that use these crazy sleds with all this cool stuff on them. It's really cool. You should read. Well, actually, the book that got a lot of normal people into the Horus Heresy was Prospero Burns, which is a big New York Times Award bestseller book that is actually quite a good book on its own. It describes the sort of aesthetic of the Space Wolves. They've cultivated an external appearance of being savage barbarian space Vikings that just tear people's throats out with their teeth, and they don't care about anybody. They've got no civilization, but that's a veneer that they've carefully crafted. They are civilized. They are reserved in a way. They have internal culture. They just don't really. They cultivate an image to basically keep people away from them, which some people can really understand that. They do purposely piss people off so that they will leave them alone, which makes them enemies. But they also have a strong sense of honor and code, and they are honorable. They are an honorable legion. They're not like this mad berserker legion that some of the other external things might make you think, like the crazy canine teeth and wolf pelts and all that sort of stuff. The Space Wolves are sort of the Emperor's executioners, is how they're known. I'm not going to get into the 2 missing legions. The Space Wolves are the Emperor's attack dogs that he will use to discipline Imperial troops with, or internal Imperial suppression stuff. They have a strong pack mentality. This is 40k lore, but I'm almost certain it's also 30k, but I couldn't find the exact source on this. But generally, Space Wolves serve with the same squad their entire service. So you start out with 20 guys, you go through on. So veteran squads will be smaller than tactical squads. They've got Grey Hunters and Grey Seekers. I think that's the name of them. Again, I haven't written it down. I've got everything written down except the names of the bloody units they serve in. Anyway, squads are given individual freedom. They operate as part of a unit, but they operate semi-independently, if that makes sense. So there's less top-down, more bottom-up command. Sergeants and squad leaders, squad sergeants, pack leaders, company leaders have a lot more power than coming from the top on down. But they also have a strong discipline way of fighting. They prefer close combat. But they also have a way of sort of throwing the opponent off balance by thinking that they're mindlessly doing something when in fact they're working quite concerted with other groups to accomplish a task in piecemeal rather than as a main force. The Space Wolves had actually taken it upon themselves to enforce an edict banning the use of the butcher's nails, which, again, if you've seen the Istvan 3 video, butcher's nails are things the word bearers put in their heads to basically turn off all emotions except rage. And the Emperor said to stop doing that because it's a bad idea. So Russ and his legion confronted Angron and his legion, or part of it anyway. Part of the legion confronted the part of the legion, and the Primarchs confronted one another. Where Russ basically said, stop doing this, the Emperor has told you to stop, and then Angron says, did the Emperor tell me to stop, or did he send you to stop me? And Russ admits that he was there on his own sort of volition. Where Angron says, maybe I should go to Terra and kill the Emperor, this great tyrant. The Angron had been a slave, and he has a very strong anti-slave mentality. He's got a strong don't listen to the masters, the High Riders. Russ basically says, did you just threaten to kill the Emperor? And Angron essentially, well, did I? So they have a fight. Angron beats Russ, but Russ gestures around them and shows that his legion was all maddened one-on-one berserkers who were charging into fights, whereas the Space Wolves had isolated them and surrounded the Primarchs with weapons drawn on them. So even if he had killed Leman Russ's Space Wolves would have killed Angron. And Russ is trying to use this as a teaching moment to show that, look, savagery is fine, but brotherhood and savagery are what wins wars, not just mindless berserk stuff. So, a cool legion. We're going to see... I won't spoil it. I'm not going to spoil anything. Just keep that in mind. Small pack tactics, bottom up chain of command, pretty resilient to battlefield shocks, with the emphasis on close combat and a veneer that means others overestimate them a lot in the way they'll behave. Joining the Space Wolves as part of the Censure host is the Legio Custodes. So the Legio Custodes are the Emperor's personal bodyguard. Not all of the 10,000 came. 10,000 roughly custodians. Custodes, custodians, you'll hear me switch back and forth, they're both right. The Custodes came with the Captain General Valdor, Constantin Valdor, who is the Emperor's chief bodyguard, head of the Custodian Order, or the Legio Custodes. They're the most perfect people in the galaxy. They are heavily gene-crafted and edited. They are bigger than even Space Marines, who are bigger than humans. Valdor is considered basically a quasi-Primarch at this point. But the Custodes are fanatically loyal to the throne, fanatically loyal to the Emperor. But they're an army of individuals. They form sort of squads called Soladites. It's a Latin word for... Basically, they form temporary groups for combat situations, which can shift between who's in the group, how many people are in the group, what the groups specialize towards. They're an army of individuals and they fight that way. Whereas the Astartes are a group of squads and companies and that sort of thing. The Custodes are purely individual. Their primary weapon is the Guardian Spear or the Guardian Axe, which is a spear or an axe with an inbuilt sort of bolt gun type thing. It's more powerful. Sometimes they deck themselves in cool Aquilon Terminator armor with Infernus fire pikes, which throw napalm, like super napalm, all the way halfway across the board. They throw out 12 inches in the tabletop game with a big flame template, which can butcher Marines. They have these crazy dreadnoughts with swords and shields, which I personally have 2 of, and I think are fantastic. They've got dreadnoughts with spears, with big melter gun things on them. They've got the cool jet bikes with lancers. The Custodes are just great. Their main troop transport is a hovering, flying craft here that you're seeing here next to me. I've got a Custodian army as well, so I quite like that. The Custodes are super elite, but there's not many of them. There's only a few hundred go to Prospero, but I'll go through the order of battle a little bit later. The Custodes had taken... the Constantine Valdor had been involved in the whole Psyche debate, but he'd taken a strictly neutral position on it. His position was the one that the Emperor had, so he was just going to go with whatever the Emperor said, and he didn't want to take a side until that had been established. So, Valdor is sort of in charge of the non-Space Wolf Imperial element of the Crusader host, of the Censure host, which is the name of the fleet and army that goes to deal with Magnus at Prospero. So he's in charge of the Imperial elements, which will go through in the order of battle. I'll delineate which ones are the Imperial army, that sort of thing, versus the Space Wolves. But there's one more force, and then I promise we'll get into the main action. The Sisters of Silence. So, the Sisters of Silence are led by Genetia Kroll, who is also on Prospero, who is a blank so powerful that she is invisible. So the Silent Sisters, or the Sisters of Silence, or the Null Maidens, are made up entirely of psychic blanks, female psychic blanks, who take a vow of silence, as you've probably interpreted from the name Sisters of Silence. They're elite warriors. They have access to specialized anti-psycho war gear. Their main weapons are sort of bolt guns. They carry the cool executioner swords, which are really cool. They've got all these sort of different kits they can be kitted out with. They take a strict vow of silence. Only the initiates into the order can speak until they take on their full vows. But they've got a complex sort of combat sign language that they use to communicate with one another, which the Custodes also understand. But to speak to outsiders, they use the initiates sort of thing. They're led by Genetia Kroll, who is a blank so powerful that she's basically invisible. You can't see her unless you're hard focusing on her, and even then your eye will sort of slip off. Think Grey Man in Wheel of Time sort of thing, but way more powerful and actually invisible. There's a few times during the Siege of Terror books where she's pretty present, where characters forget that she's in the room when they're speaking about something, or they look over and they're surprised to see that she's there. A lot of the Silent Sisters are just normal blanks, in that they're sort of mid-level blanks, which is still incredibly powerful. They shut down psychic powers in sort of small groups. 3 or 4 of them will stop using psychic powers in a certain distance. There are also the Oblivion Knights, there's about a dozen of them, go to Prospero, who are the sort of more powerful blanks, the leaders of the various different organizations, or of the various different sort of substructures of the Sisters of Silence. We're not going to get into all that. Who are even more powerfully blank, bigger null radius that shuts down psychic powers, more dampening, that sort of thing. Genetia Kroll has got the biggest, she's the most powerful. They cooperate closely with the Custodes and the sort of talons of the Emperor, sort of formations as they used to be called back in the day. They are primarily support troops, in that they're meant to be around to stop the enemy using psychic powers so that other troops can kill the enemy. Not that the Silent Sisters aren't good at fighting, but they're more valuable as support assets than as frontline combat assets, as you can understand. As Leman Russ is equipping himself on Beta Garmon to go and arrest his brother, remember it's an arrest warrant, it's only an arrest warrant, he gets a communication that changes his orders. His orders are now to eliminate the Thousand Sons and destroy Prospero and crush the Legion and kill Magnus the Red. He's to enact the ultimate sanction, the destruction of the planet, and kill everybody. To this end, he has the armories of Beta Garmon opened up to him, all the forbidden tech, the forbidden weapons, the forbidden tech's a bit too far, but the rad weapons, the radiation weapons, phosphex flames, which are these sort of crazy, almost semi-eternally burning fire that destroys everything and is really toxic, chem flamers, nasty stuff you don't use outside of the small destroyer regiments, destroyer units, within the Legion, who basically die of cancer quite quickly. You're not supposed to deploy these sort of walking war crimes. Essentially, every single one of these weapons is like a death penalty level war crime to even use. And these are basically, the armories are opened up, and a whole unit is equipped with these sort of things. The Black Cull is a formation of Space Wolves that gets equipped with these super powerful, massively destructive weapons. He also takes on a lot of orbital destructive weapons, planet-wide toxin weapons, chem-burning flame weapons that'll destroy planets, or wipe life off planets. Loads up with all this stuff, and then the force under Valdor arrives. And Valdor basically goes, "What are you doing?" No, the Emperor sent me with this arrest warrant, and you're going to enact it. Well, he gave it to you, so I'm going to come with you to enact the arrest of Magnus the Red. And Russ says, well, I've been given new orders to kill Magnus the Red and wipe out his Legion, and that's what I'm going to do, because these are the most current orders from a super high-ranking Imperial person. And so, at Beta Garmon, there's a little fight between Valdor and Russ sets out for Prospero, and Valdor's given no choice but to go out with him. I will tell you who sent that instruction to Russ after we go through the order of battle for both sides. So, for the Space Wolves order of battle, we have 11 great companies of the Space Wolves Legion, which is the majority of the Legion, consisting of 73,200 Space Wolves. We have Overseer Boros Kern of the Sons of Horus, with 5,000 members of the Sons of Horus Legion. That's one a lot of people miss. The Sons of Horus were present for the burning of Prospero in a small force. The Titan Legions of both sides don't play a part in the actual fight that we're going to look at. They fight out on the plains on their own thing. I'll mention them, but they're almost all irrelevant to the actual fighting, except for when it gets kind of funny towards the end. But you'll have to wait for that. Legio Mortis, who would become one of the most famous traitor legions, traitor Titan legions, who is fighting now for the Sons of for the Space Wolves. I almost said Lunar Wolves. Have 12 Titans, including a Warlord Titan, the Titan Eterna Virtus. Warlord Titans are basically the biggest Titans that there are around. Basically, there are bigger ones, but realistically, a Warlord Titan is essentially a game over button for any conflict. There are 4 regiments of Imperial Army troops, totaling about 30,000 men total. The 19th Chthonian Headhunters, which are known for trophy-taking and brutality, who mostly operate with the Sons of Horus. And so, whenever I say Sons of Horus, think Chthonian Headhunter Imperial Army with them as well. The rest operate with the troops that are led by Valdor. The Yadrinian Seekers, a regiment raised from the Yadran cluster, which had been devastated by psychic activity. So, anti-Psyker Imperial Army troops, in that they hate Psykers, not that they're equipped to deal with Psykers. So, nice politically motivated, or not politically, but nice motivated anti-enemy troops are always good. And the 73rd and 75th echelons of the Host of Brass, which has just got Khorne vibes, but we won't even go into that. Feudal worlders indoctrinated to despise Psykers, armed with primitive gear, but with chemical slug throwers. So think basically chemical bullets, chemically poisoned firearms, which is always good. And only known to Constantine Valdor and the Silent Sisters, but 3 ultra-secret warlord Psi-Titans of the Ordo Sinister were also present. So the Ordo Sinister is a secret organization of about 25 warlord-class Titans, decked out with insane psychic weapons, and basically with just walking war crimes with ability to tap into hell and use the power of hell to destroy the enemy. So these are super powerful Titans. Only Valdor and a few members of the Silent Sisterhood knows these are present, and they were kept a secret from Russ for the entire time. That is the Censure host that is coming after the planet of Prospero and Magnus the Red to now kill them, apparently. So, the Thousand Sons, who are not expecting this fight, but we'll get into that. So, the Thousand Sons are not on a war footing. This is just what happens to be on Prospero at the time. Magnus the Red, with 9 fellowships, but not all of the 9 fellowships. The 4th isn't really present. It's only a few hundred guys. 58,900 Marines are present from the various different fellowships. There are thousands of Marines on detachment all over the galaxy, as you can understand. You don't have the whole Legion together at once all the time, but the bulk of the Legion is there. The vast majority is there. The Order of the Ruin, the Blind, and the Jackal, which are sort of these small groups of Marines who specialize in Ruin, have battle automata, so 800 psychically active battle automata, like the Castellax here, which are really cool. I wish I had my painted one. It's just outside of my arm's reach to grab a painted Castellax and show you, but I'll put a picture of it up here. Essentially, you put a bunch of psychic wires and all stuff through this thing, and you make it all psychically crazy active, so it looks like this, and you enhance it to basically be a warp-powered or warp-assisted battle automata. That's not a robot. There's a human brain controlling this. You basically take the human body, strip everything away from it except the nervous system, put it in there, and then use it as a supercomputer to power this robot. Because humanity doesn't use AI. But we'll get into that when we talk about the Civil War on Mars, if I ever get there. We'll get to the Order of the Blind and the Jackal when they come up. The Blind we'll definitely talk about. I'm not sure the Jackal becomes important. We'll see as we go on. They're assisted by the Prosperine Guard, also the Spire Guard are part of this unit. 85,000 Imperial Army troops, Solar Auxilia. When I say Imperial Army, I mean Solar Auxilia. So the Prosperine Guard look like this. They have elite regiments armed with giant two-handed power axes, sickle-bladed power axes. They have heavy artillery and vehicles, as does the Space Wolf Solar Auxilia. So if you're familiar with the 40k, you think Imperial Guard are sort of mono regiments, so you have infantry, tank, mechanized. The Solar Auxilia are all-in-one combined arms regiments. So you got mechanized infantry, normal infantry, tanks operating with mechanized, which you've never seen in 40k, very rare for Rebellion regions. They've got their own integrated artillery support. They don't need to rely on others. Own integrated tank units, own integrated heavy weapon teams. So yeah, the Solar Auxilia are decked out. There's about 85,000 of them. And there are 8,000 combat autonoma of Zau Akkad Tagmata. So you got 8,000 Thalax, Castellax. Can't remember the names of the other ones. Ursarax. Trying to remember the names of the weird-looking ones that crawl around. I'll put a picture of them up here in the name. These are all essentially human beings. There's a good picture of a Thalax. There's a good picture of what a Thalax is here. You can see you just basically thread the nervous system around the thing and keep it alive with a human brain, and there you go. You've got yourself a supercomputer that won't instantly turn to chaos and try to wipe out humanity, which is what AI does in 30k anyway. They are backed up by the Legio Zestibiax with 12 Titans, with a Warlord Titan present. The Titans are, again, irrelevant for the battle. They're all off in the plains of plains of Prospero. Sorry, Tizca is the city. They're in the plains of Prospero fighting it out amongst themselves. There is also an inert Warlord Titan, the Canis Vertex, which is so heavily damaged that it's useless. It's been gutted for parts, and they basically leave the shell of it in the middle of of Prospero, in the middle of Tizca, as basically a war memorial. This big Warlord Titan. So it looks like there's a Warlord Titan in the middle of Tizca, but there isn't. It's just a fake. It's still got all the guns on it and everything, but they're unoperational because it's been stripped for parts. The first Helican, and more importantly, the Magdan Free Corps, have been transferred to Prospero on the orders of the War Master. He sent them there as a sort of a rest and refit operation. These regiments are both fanatically loyal Imperial regiments that essentially the War Master has sent here to die, because it's the War Master, Horus Lupercal, who has given Leman Russ the order that Magnus should be killed. Unknown to the Imperium, Horus has turned traitor. He's just about to do, he's a few months away from Isfahan III. He knows that Magnus knows that he's going to betray him, and so he wants to strike a blow against a Loyalist Legion by destroying the Loyalist 15th Legion, 1,000 Suns, and at the same time bloody the Space Wolves, who he will send against them. Magnus is overwhelmed by guilt and is hiding in the Pyramid of Photep, which is at the center of Tizca, which is his personal residence in the sort of center of the town, the city. He knows the invasion's coming, but doesn't tell anybody. He's thrown up an incredibly powerful psychic shield, which blocks all communication in or out. Nobody can see through the psychic shield either. And Magnus actually kills one of his own captains, Captain Belek Uthazar of the Fifth Fellowship, when he learns that the enemy's coming and tries to arm everybody and put everyone on a war footing. Magnus kills him. So Magnus is essentially regretting what he's done, accepted his fate, and is waiting for the Space Wolves to come and take him away or kill him. And he is prepared for that. So I promise some action, so we'll do a little bit of action at the beginning of the battle, which I'll then recap in the next video so that it'll run smoothly. Anyway, so the population knows of the action of the Censure host, who is up in orbit, who spent weeks trying to communicate with Magnus. They've spent weeks sending voxes and messages down at the planet on Valdor's orders. Russ wanted to just get in and start killing, but Valdor said, no, we have to try and negotiate. But unfortunately, no Vox communication can get past the psychic barrier. No one can really see in or out. So for weeks, they're just desperately trying to contact them. Please, come on, look, we just need to negotiate. All fails. And so Leman Russ gets his way. And the first anyone knows is when virus bombs and all sorts of other planet-killing weapons that aren't planet crackers. So they're not destroying the planet, but firestorms over the whole thing. Toxins, gas, all this sort of stuff. Barrage down and smash on the planet. So you're just sitting in your living room one day, and you look outside and there's a firestorm of hell destroying everything, and the atmosphere's on fire, and there's all sorts of poison gas and sludge and suicidal radiation everywhere, and war crimes raining from the sky. but the psychic shield protects the city of Tizca. The minor cities of Prospero are all completely destroyed by this. And when everybody sees that, they immediately go on a war footing.
What's that? War were declared.
Companies begin to arm themselves. The Thousand Sons start rallying around their fellowship pyramids, which they have in the center. I'll put a map up in the next video so you can see. Irrelevant now. And the Censure host prepares to land. The Space Wolves will make the first landfall, but that'll be in the next video. So thank you very much for watching. Next video is all action. It's the Battle of Tizca, starting with the Space Wolf landing near the port. So if you enjoy a bit of action, the next one is for you. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.